This is the text animation that we are going to be making today. Head over to your effects, now go to titles, and now grab a text plus node. You are going to place this on your timeline, and now you can customize the text a bit. So let's put in text plus, so we match the title that we had previously, and now let's just make it really big, and let's change the font to something like Satoshi. That looks really nice. So Satoshi, let's leave it at regular, so we have a difference to the one that I made before. And now before we jump into the Fusion page, you just want to make sure that your clip is 2 seconds and 1 frame long. This is going to make your life way easier. Let's jump into Fusion. You can either just click on the Fusion page or go up here. And now you want to click on template, click here where you have your text, right click on it and choose follower. This whole animation is going to be based on the follower modifier because this is the effect that does the kind of staggering of the text as it animates on. And now that we have our follower modifier active, we can go over followers because we don't want to mess with all of these settings over here. We want to mess with them over here. So that means go into transform, and now let's do a keyframe at frame 30. So that's going to be half a second. And now let's click keyframe on offset, and it's going to teleport us over to the path modifier. We are going to ignore that. Just open up the follower again and pin this so this doesn't happen again. You can also pin the path modifier, but we are not going to be using that today. So once we have this keyframed, go back to the beginning at frame 0 and play around with the X and Y value. And this is basically going to determine where from your text comes onto the screen. I have it set to -0.15. So this is going to be the first part of our animation, and as you can see when I play it, it moves up, but it moves up linearly, which isn't really nice. We are going to fix that in just a moment, but let's actually animate it out first. So I'm going to go to frame 90, which is again 30 frames from the end, and I'm going to set another keyframe at the offset so it basically stays still in the middle over here. And now let's go to frame 120 and put it back down. So I'm going to do -0.15. And as you can see, when I now play it, it's actually going to rise up, stay there, and then go back, and it loops back and forth. So this is pretty nice, right? But we want to affect a few more animations with this because moving up and down is pretty cool. But when we look at the edit page, the text is just going to appear suddenly and then move up, and it's not really that smooth. Let's go to the Fusion page and let's actually add some opacity to this as well. You want to go into shading, and now white solid fill over here at number 1, and you want to play with this opacity slider right here. So we are going to go to frame 0, put this all the way to 0, and now hit the keyframe, and the text is going to completely disappear. Now you want to go to frame 30 and put the opacity back up to 1, and do the same thing at frame 90 over here. Just set another keyframe at 1 and then go to, let's say, 110. Let's do it 10 frames before the actual animation of it moving down finishes. This is going to give it some sort of a faster go out effect. So let's put this to absolute 0, and when we now play it in the edit page, it's actually going to make sense. The text will just appear, and this is a pretty slick animation by itself, but we can make the animation itself smoother. So you can open up your spline editor up over here, and this will open up this huge grid. Click on your template. Now click over here. This is going to open up all of your graphs of all of the animations that we have right here. And these are basically the values that you are changing. As you can see, it's going from a value of 0 all the way to a value of 1. And now when we play our playhead through it, we can see exactly what is happening. I have already smoothing on this because I changed some sort of setting in Fusion. I don't really know what, but I'm going to do it with you. If you don't see these graphs or you have them some sort of zoomed in or zoomed out, you can click this icon and this is going to center all of them. So let's first play with the displacement only. So I'm going to double click on the opacity so it disappears, and now you can see that our animation over here is really linear. That means it's changing the value on a straight line like this. So if you want to smooth it out, just select the 2 and hit S on your keyboard. This is going to add an S curve, which is going to make it really smooth. If you want to customize this a bit more, while you have these 2 selected, hit T on your keyboard, and this is going to bring up your ease in and ease out value. And I played around with these, and I figured out that ease in should be at around 100. That looks pretty much the best. So when we now play it, it's going to move rapidly up and then slow down at the very end, which is going to give it this cool like sinking into place motion. So when we play it, let's make sure we have nothing selected, and as you can see, it really speeds up and then gets slowly into place. I really like this effect. And on the way out, we can play with this a tiny bit. So we are just playing around with the position and we basically want it to quickly disappear. So we are going to do the absolute opposite over here. We are not going to play around with the ease in. By the way, I just double clicked on this to reset it to the default value, and I'm going to put the ease out to something like that. Oh, that looks actually pretty nice. Or if you want this to be sooner, you can grab one of these handles and actually move it out manually. And this is also going to give it a custom curve. You can play around with this till you find something that you really like. For example, I think this is going to do pretty well. Like this fast descent at the beginning and then it just smooths out at the end. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. But I want to adjust the opacity so it's already invisible somewhere around here, or at least close to invisible. I'm going to click on the opacity to bring it up again, and now I'm just going to click once on the displacement. That means it's still going to show my curves, but I no longer can affect them. So I'm going to select these two, and let's take a look at the beginning animation. Okay, that looks pretty solid actually. So I'm not going to play with that much, but I'm just going to grab this handle, hold down Option or Alt if you're on Windows, and drag this along. This is going to make sure you're not fiddling around up and down with it, but just moving it in a straight line. So I'm going to adjust this like that. And this should, yeah, that looks pretty good. So at the end over here, I want a really fast fall off. I actually want to move this a little bit closer even, I think. Yeah. I want to end at somewhere around frame 102, and I can either just move the keyframe by just keyframing another position over here, setting it to 0, or you can just select the keyframe down here and hold down Shift so you don't move up and down, and just move it to frame 102. And now it's going to do the animation much quicker. And when we go back to the edit page, we can have a clear view of this. So it's going to pop up and now it's going to pop down. And that's a little bit too harsh, I think, at the end. So I'm just going to play around with this a bit. I think ease in, no, ease out. Yeah, just increase the ease out to something like 70. And now when we take a look at it as it goes out, yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. Okay, so now that we have the whole spline thing finished, we can close it up because we are not going to need it anymore. And let's move these two nodes over here because we are going to add 2 more nodes to it. But first and foremost, let's actually get the follower effect going because that's why we are here. So you're going to go to modifiers, now go to timing, and now set this delay to something like 2 frames. And as you can see, our text is already moving because I'm in the middle of the animation. And this is basically going to be the delay between the first character actually going, like you can see, it's taking 1 step, taking 2 steps. And as soon as we cross to the first frame, it's actually going to move the second character now. So the delay is 2 frames. I like to set it to something like 3.2. This is a pretty good value, I feel like. It gives this nice kind of distance between the characters and it really feels intentional. So you can play around with these settings a bit with the order that it goes through. So automatic is basically always going to do left to right for most things. So left to right, classic, right to left, the other direction. I feel like the inside out and outside in are pretty cool, especially for like big names. And then you can also do a random 1 by 1. That's also pretty cool. So just play around with these, see what works for your particular project. I'm just going to keep it to left to right. And you can also set the delay type from between each character to between first and last character. Okay, so that's the whole follower modifier. As you can see, it's actually really easy to use. You just need to remember that it doesn't affect all of the tools that you have in the tools section, but instead it only affects the things that you change in the actual follower modifier itself. If you want to add a shadow to this text, don't do it through the shading section over here because that's just going to mess up things. Just go into Open Effects, search for shadow and grab a drop shadow and just drop it onto your title itself. Okay, now after you've done this, you might think that you're done, but you're really not, because if I stretch this clip out now, it's basically not going to work well because as I play it, it's just going to go back to the original 2 seconds that we put it in, and that's not good. Here's a really simple way to fix this. I'm just going to hit Ctrl Z. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Fusion and now hit Shift Space and search for keyframe. And this is going to pop up the keyframe stretcher. So add that and now add it to your line by holding down Shift and going over the line. This is just going to connect it up. And now, because at the very beginning we set our whole thing to 2 seconds and 1 frame, this is going to be all correct. So source start is going to be 0 frames, source end is going to be 120 frames. If you didn't set it correctly at the beginning, it's no problem at all. Just take a look where your keyframes are, and the first keyframe is basically going to be 0, and the last keyframe that you have over here is going to be your source end. So just put it to those values, and now you want to play around with this stretch start and stretch end. Everything that's between these two is basically going to get stretched. That's the middle section where the text doesn't actually do anything. You want to go to frame number 30, which is our frame where everything stops, and move this to frame number 30. And now we know that our outward animation starts at frame number 90. So go to the keyframe stretcher and set this to 90. And it's as simple as that. Now, when you come back into the edit page and you stretch this out a bit, it's going to adjust, it's going to stay up, and when we reach the end, it's going to go back down. Just make sure when you're shorting down the clip again, you don't go below that 2 second and 1 frame mark. One more thing that I have in this text that I don't have right here is the glow, and it's really simple to add. Just go into the Fusion page again. Now click on this template, go to Shift Space, and now just search for glow. I use the soft glow over here, and just apply that. You can play around a little bit with the glow itself, and that's pretty much it. You can also keyframe it, but with the glow, it's not that necessary. It's not really that visible, to be honest. I'm just going to boost it up a bit because it's pretty much not visible at all. I'm just going to keep it at the default value. Yeah, and now you can see that our text has this really nice glow, and when we play the actual animation, it looks pretty fine. And as you can see, when we now compare the text we just created with the text we got before that I showed you at the beginning, it's the exact same thing. So here you go. This is how you make this really sick text plus animation. So hopefully I helped you out today. If you have any questions around this, just leave them in the comments down below. By the way, if you want to know how I created this background over here, it's part of the editor collection from Jake Whip. I'm going to leave a little link down below if you want to check it out. It has a lot of useful tools. So that's going to be it for today. Hopefully this helps, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye bye.